Welcome to Inside Open Technologies, presented by CSuite Edge.
Hi, and welcome to the first episode of the CSuite Edge Open Technologies. I'm joined today by Dr. Mark Lenox, whom I consider a friend, a mentor, a candidate, a client. Gosh, Mark, what else should I throw out there?
It could be just about anything on a given day. So
It could be about anything.
this is what entrepreneurs do, right? I mean, we kind of put on whatever hat we need to do and we just go do it. That's how this game is played.
We do. And you know what's interesting is the whole wardrobe and the job market and the labor sourcing and in the VC and PE worlds and in tech in general, and every company's a tech company nowadays, to quote someone who shall not be named. The whole wardrobe's changing right now. And you've recently written a very intriguing, you built on a thought project, a white paper about the rise of the AllStack recruiter. And it's not just about technological enablement. There's so much more behind it. So could you take maybe 60 seconds, Mark, kind of let people know where you are, what you're doing, how you got there, and then maybe we could push off and talk about the rise of the AllStack developer.
Yeah,
Did I say recruiter?
It did, but that's okay. We'll figure that out. So, for me, at my core, I'm a developer, right? I've been writing code, building systems, engineer for decades. And, but I'm also a business leader and I'm also a venture capitalist. And all of the change that we're seeing in artificial intelligence now is changing everything. And it's changing it at just absolute warp speed. Elon Musk referred to it as a supersonic tsunami. And I don't think it's quite that fast, but it's really, really fast. And so, like everybody else, I'm just trying to wrap my head around all of this and figure out what's really going on. I need to understand the why so that I can understand how to take advantage of it. How are we going to work with this in order to bring some level of benefit? Because it's all a tool, and it's like any new tool. We got to learn how to drive the thing in order to make it work right. And so I wrote that paper really as an exercise to myself. I really didn't at the time have any thoughts about trying to put it out there and publish it or do anything with it. I was really just trying to wrap my heads around the whole thing, because the whole deal with also me being an academic, that's how my thought process works. I want to put it in. When I put it in writing, I can get it clear. And so that's what I really started with on this whole process. And there's a lot of people talking. And I listen to people talk, but not very much. I watch what people do, because that's where the rubber really hits the road. And, where's the money flowing to? What are people doing? And everybody else is like, yeah, whatever. But in the last couple of months now, I've been working a new project, and we'll have some time probably on another talk to talk about exactly what I'm doing there. It has been remarkable to me how all of this has worked its way forward, and the AI tools have accelerated my ability to build things in ways that if you would have told me 6 months ago that we were doing what we're doing right now, I'd have told you were crazy.
Well, can I interject something right here on this, Mark, because I think it's relevant, and we don't have to go into the details about the current company you're building. But I think it's important that listeners understand a couple of things. Your background, development, engineering, science, now venture capital, among other things. You're not just sitting back and pontificating or theorizing. I know with this new venture, you guys are anticipating, you're already funded, you're up and running, and you're anticipating building a company that could potentially bring in hundreds of millions in revenue. And there's two people. There's you doing development with your agents, and there's a go-to-market person, and that's it. And I think when you talk about the rubber meeting the road, why should someone listen to the rest of this podcast? Why should someone go find this white paper on LinkedIn? Of course, when we drop this episode, I'm going to include the white paper with it. The reason being is you're not just spouting theory. You're not looking at charts and being academic, although your process has its roots in academics. You're doing, which is really remarkable, because typically people sit back and go, well, I can't because of whatever. And you're saying, I can't. Well, I can because now we can do this. And I think one of the things I try to listen to the most when I listen to someone, a podcaster or someone I interview or a client, whoever it might be, are they eating their own cooking? Are they putting their money where their mouth is? That to me is a high level of critical involvement to say, here's theory, but here's what we're finding.
That's exactly right. And from my perspective, as I said, as a developer, as a business leader, I'm talking about this from the inside. I'm talking about it from the direction that I'm taking with my company. And you're right. Yeah, there's just two of us. And my goal is to get this company to a $1 billion valuation with less than 5 people. And I think it can be done.
Yeah, when I came out of college, way back in the 19s, right?
When $1 billion was a lot of money?
When $1 billion company, that's a big company. You could work there for 30 years and never have to go anywhere. That's like, is that even a medium company nowadays?
It's pretty good. It's still real money.
It's real money, but it's not, you can crash and burn $1 billion company.
Yeah.
Just like you can crash and burn $1 million company. Can you crash and burn a large publicly traded company with multiple bazillions in revenue? Probably not. Board will step in, probably, or or the SEC or whoever. But it's a lot harder.
It is.
But the idea that the barriers are such, they've been lowered to such a point that you could do it. Someone like me could do it with a very small, committed group of people who are in alignment towards the same goals. That's just crazy. Like you said, 6 months or a year ago, that's crazy talk. But here it is.
But it is happening. And so the pieces that are falling into place to make that happen is what I call the AllStack developer. And, over the course of the last decades, developers have been working with a variety of tools, and we've created some very sophisticated systems. And, there's front-end developers and back-end developers and all, people that work on different parts of it. But there's one celebrated kind of developer that we call the full stack developer. And that's somebody that can work all the way up and down the entire software stack. And software is built in layers, so we call it a stack. And you go from the GUI on the front end all the way down to the database at the back end. Somebody who can operate across that entire space is a very, very valuable person. Well, what's happening now with AI tools is that we're taking away a lot of the drudgery of that, because there's a lot of detail. There's immense amounts of detail in making sure that all of these pieces fit and work together. And there's a lot of learning that has to go on anytime you bring in a new portion of the stack. There's a lot of business understanding, business logic that has to go in there. So, that's coming in from the outside, and the designers are throwing stuff at you, and you're trying to get it implemented and get it going in order to help, do whatever business process you're trying to go after. And all of that is really challenging work. Well, the new AI tools are so helpful in helping your learning process, helping your actual development process. Little things can happen in an instant. And so a lot of little things can happen in minutes. And what that does for you is it really tightens up the loop so that you can implement things very quickly, and more of your cognitive abilities are available for other things. Now, full stack developers themselves, there's some of them out there that are a lot more than that. And They have knowledge, they have business knowledge, they have knowledge of all these other stacks within the company, because all business processes are all built the same way. They're all just layered up things that are sequential kinds of things that a company does in order to provide whatever their product or service is.
Mhm.
So somebody who's been there a long time knows how finance works. They know how regulatory works. They know how some of these other things work. So the whole development loop tightens up as it all kind of pulls together. You don't have as much have to have as much communication within a whole bunch of people, because there aren't as
Mhm.
many people. In my company, we have two, and our communication is tight, and we can move extremely fast. And so as that process tightens up, and an all-stack developer operates across multiple stacks, and so they're able to innovate within the company at a variety of levels at all times, and that is a tremendous accelerating force. It's
Let's talk
also
about
different for the structure of the company, and we'll get into that in
Mhm.
a minute. You got a question?
No, but let's talk about that for a second, because I find it interesting, because you're coming from the tech perspective. You could have said full stack engineer, you could have said full
Yeah,
stack leader, or
yeah,
all stack leader, or however you want to put it. But I've had this idea in my head for a while now, at least a couple years, that as AI promulgates, human interaction, human connection becomes much more valuable, much more important.
that's right.
But you end up, I think, eventually in a market with this massive cloud of very large companies, a very static companies coming in and out, but otherwise static in volume, medium layer. And then you have this amazing explosion. The pull a geologic term, you have this Precambrian type explosion, where there's nothing. And then suddenly, boom, everything's there, because now a person who has specific domain knowledge, say this person's not a full stack developer, but they have specific domain knowledge and want to solve a specific problem. That person can now work across every required stack: tech, finance, sales, the whole kit and caboodle, in order to solve that problem. And I find that really exciting, really intriguing, really
It is.
fascinating. And so I wonder if you can expand a little bit on this idea of full stack versus all stack and the evolution that's happening, because of most full stack developers I've worked with in the past and placed or searched for or whatever, they haven't been right out of school. These
No.
are people who have had time to evolve, gain life and business experience, earn business acumen, which I think is hypercritical. So can you expand on that a little bit, and why it's so important that the barriers laterally, if you have all these stacks up like a bar graph, these stacks laterally, are the barriers between them are evaporating?
They are. And, you know, again, some CEO somewhere vibe codes himself a system over the weekend and, wants to
Mm-hmm.
put it into play. There's a difference between somebody who's not a full stack developer doing that and somebody who is.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is reliability and scalability and all of that. The tech stack is still a very complex thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it is really challenging for somebody outside of a developer to really handle that in a way that's going to work for your business. That barrier is coming down. The tools that we have today are as bad as they're ever going to be. And moving forward, we're going to have tools that are going to help with that tech complexity, and it is going to make it so that people who are not necessarily full stack software developers, it's going to enable them to create some pretty amazing products. And where we're at though right now is the I think the tech people have a real advantage. It's a whole lot easier to turn a developer into a really experienced developer with some business acumen and all of that. It's really much easier to turn them into a CEO than it is to turn a CEO into a developer. It's
But even then, do you need to do it by yourself, or could you have a wingman, so to speak, i.e., you've
yeah,
got a go-to-market person in your
yeah,
company
Yep.
And while you may create these stacks, the communication loop is so tight that, hey, I need X. Okay, we can have that for you in a week or whatever. And we just have to get some iterations done and make sure it's exactly within the site picture that it needs to be like. So
No
again,
question.
the
So
barrier is,
we did a thing. We did a kind of a demo. I did a demo for my go-to-market guy, and he had some great suggestions. And we did that demo at in the, I guess it was 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, and everything was back in the repository and done by 5 that day.
wow.
So we were, we can move very fast, and that agility for any company is just amazing, right? And this is where we're running into trouble with other, with larger companies. I mean, it's very difficult for them to have that kind of agility.
Yeah. And, it's interesting too, is if we had time in this conversation, I'm sure we could go down this road. I mean, I've interviewed CIOs of large multinational or global companies, and they're not in a blazing hurry to adopt AI. And the reason being is because there's so much invested in the systems that are there, the structures that are there. And so we're talking about something that's almost out of whole cloth, a new cut, so to speak, when we go down this road. And to your point, agility can be wonderful. Big companies aren't built for it because they're really focused on repeatable, reliable results and
They are
processes.
process-centric organizations by
And
definition.
this is the foundation of evolving that
It is.
and it becoming more agile, more nimble. And in fact, we've talked about agility and nimbleness in business before, but it's always been very limited. And with these barriers fading, that limitation's also fading. The challenge is going to come up, I believe, is the ability not just to make quick decisions, but to make good decisions.
For sure.
And that I know is a key point in your white paper.
It is. It really is. I think what we're seeing now as these loops tighten up and we're able to be more agile and do that, what you really want to do, and I've heard this said before. This I think this is a great saying, is I
Mhm.
want AI to do the dishes for me so that I can do art. Instead, now what we're seeing is AI doing art and I still have to do the dishes. Well, I think that is changing. And so, and I really see it changing in how we're doing software development. And so what is happening is a lot of the drudgery is going away, and I am able to concentrate on the important pieces, the things that are really going to matter, the things that require real humanity, right?
Mhm.
There are plenty of small tasks. I can send agents out and to have them, update this database schema and repopulate it for me and do whatever and update this API. I need the following features. Boom, they can go out and do that stuff. I
Right.
don't I
Right.
don't have to waste my compute cycles to do it. I want to use my compute cycles for judgment. I want to create a judgment centric organization that retains the humanity of what we are and the things that humanity does really well, making the right decisions at the right time for the right reasons, because why matters. And that's the bottom line. Create a agile organization that responds in the right ways and try to leave the rest of it to the tools.
It's an interesting thing. And you and I have had some of this conversation before and private. As we've been developing our own tool that we use, I haven't wanted to replace the judgment of an experienced talent acquisition professional, experienced recruiter, experienced headhunter, however you want to phrase it. What I want to do is help them be more of that and less of the drudgery, the tediousness that comes with everything from documentation to uh, chunks of the sourcing and chunks of this and chunks of that. In fact, my philosophy is the faster I get two people talking, the better
That's
the
it.
process is going to be. So how do I take that space in between and let AI do it in such a way that it allows me to be a better human at whatever the task is, doing the human things? Because when we talk about judgment, it's an interesting topic because there's so many facets of it. But I think one of the most important, one of the biggest barriers between where we are today with technology and, say, AGI or super intelligence or however you want to look at it. Sure, someday. Today, AI is still a system, still good in, good out. It's still a program. No, it can make certain decisions, but based on what it's intook, how it learns, it's going to influence what its outputs are.
Very narrow. In a very narrow space, you can do things really well. And as an aside, I think this was a brilliant move on the decision making of Anthropic when they
Mm-hmm.
started driving into code pretty heavily. They drove themselves into a very narrow thing that they can be very, very good at.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was a strategic move. I don't really know. I don't have any insight into why they made it, but in retrospect, it turns out that it was a really good idea.
Well,
And
because
there
it's
are
powering
lots of
everything.
yeah, exactly. Well, it gets you into the business side of everything. If you're working with if you can make the code process go better,
Mm-hmm.
then everything else goes better, and that's really valuable to companies for sure.
But we still haven't coded in gut instinct,
Correct.
compassion, empathy,
Yeah.
sympathy.
Computers are not very
And
good at that.
they're not very good at that. But we are.
Yes.
So the technology today, as it sits today, and probably into the foreseeable future, in my opinion, I could be wrong. You hear other people talking, well, AGI could just be around the corner. If you think about the incredible and vast and ridiculously obscene amounts of information a human child takes in every day through their five senses. I don't, has AI passed a 3 or 4-year-old yet? Because I don't want a 3 or 4-year-old making judgment decisions when it comes to where I'm going to take a business or I'm going to take my life, um, things of that nature. I'll let them talk. I'll let them tell me what they like and dislike. You don't like the spinach? What about a carrot? But I don't want to go further than that. And I look at AI in that respect, and that it is still constrained within the boundaries of human imagination and innovation.
It is. And so the beauty of the AI tools for developers is that it's a narrow field.
Mm-hmm.
They can go in there. Empathy and things like that don't matter in code. Not really. It matters in the products we develop. So that's why you're enabling the humanity part more because they're spending less time dealing with is this flag true or false?
Yeah.
And those tools just make it so much more powerful. I think you're going to see a lot of really, really great products come.
Well, this ties a couple of things together, though, doesn't it? Because we just talked about big companies a few minutes ago and how slow they are to react and turn because they're so invested in a system with reliable processes, repeatable processes that produce reliable results in a perfect world. We're not constrained by that as entrepreneurs or
That's
as
right.
venture capitalists or as whoever. Now, having said that, this move, this idea, this evolution that jobs need to become more judgment centric versus, say, function specific.
Correct.
There's an evolution that's going on, not just in how it's perceived and pushed into the market, because let's remember the golden rule of the job market, whoever has the gold makes the
Makes
rules.
the rules. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it's these big companies pushing this stuff out. How does a company navigate, Mark? How should we look at the speed of this evolution? What does it look like 2 or 3 years down the road for a company like yours versus a company like, pick Coca-Cola, Apple, whoever it might be.
Sure. So over the course of forever, um, big companies, they operate on a process-centric model. They
Mm-hmm.
have a person that has a job description. They sit in that seat and they do that thing. They take the call and they turn it into an
Mm-hmm.
order and enter something on a computer and send a piece of paper to accounting and maybe another one to manufacturing and information flows, and it's all very, very process-centric. Well,
Mm-hmm.
agents are actually pretty good at a lot of that stuff. Computer agents are. And so you can automate many of those processes. And the thing about that is, once you've done that, it's relatively easy to change what that agent does because it's just in their description. It's like changing code. You can change the processes and how by which a company functions really very, very quickly. Changing how people think and what they do is really, really hard. So
Yeah.
innovation in a big company is just unbelievably difficult. You take, some of these big, big multinationals, steering them is tougher than steering a big super tanker, right? It is
Mm-hmm.
really a lot of force has to be applied and it's not pretty and nobody likes it. So they innovate by buying small innovative companies that have developed some
Mm-hmm.
technique or some technology that really works in their market. And then they bring them into the fold. And then they realize fairly quickly that the the crown jewels of the company go home every night. The people are what makes the company work. And you've taken people from a really innovative environment to a very, very process driven environment. And a lot of those people leave. And sometimes the big companies really honestly didn't get very much for their money. Well, now, if you start talking about a company that is super judgment centric, so companies like mine, where we are built, we use agents where we can, we use humans where we want real human judgment involved. And now I think we're a lot better positioned to be bought and integrated into a larger company because all of the processes we've developed, all
Mm-hmm.
those agents, they work 24/7. They don't go
They're all
home at
software.
night. And they're all software. That's all going to come across. And you only have to convince a few people to come over. And it's a whole lot easier to do change management on a group of, say, less than 10 than it is
Mm-hmm.
to do change management on a group of 1,000. And I actually told a pretty cool anecdote of all of change management in the white paper. So that whole process, I think, makes judgment-centric companies a better candidate for integration in larger companies because you pull all of that innovation in, you pull all of those automated processes in, and it's only going to grow. You can do more and more and more and start to spread some of that innovation into whoever is buying you.
Well, it has, when I look at a company in my industry, typically your two biggest expenses are people and real estate. Okay. Well, I solved the real estate piece by just being completely distributed, and bring in experienced people,
I'm
so
the
on and
same.
so forth. Um, but the people are still a big cost center. Now, technology and the tech stack is picking up, obviously, with the development work we've been doing. But I sit back and look at this, Mark. I've always believed, you've heard me say this, I think, a number of times, that as AI, as this tech promulgates out in the market, the value of the human interaction, the human connection, the human abilities, truly things that set us apart, is only going to increase. And it's going to increase massively. It has to.
It has to.
When you look at this, the value of a company built with a judgment centric philosophy or direction is largely in part because if you're going to acquire someone like that, I think, just on the front end, looking very short term, your integration cost plummet.
Go way down.
They
Way,
go
way down.
way down. You're not having to lay off 500 people or 5,000 people. Now, for people whose jobs get automated because what they're doing is considered tedious, but very repetitive, and you can do it reliably with AI, with software, whatever. There are going to be opportunities for them because of the rise of the AllStack developer, that idea in the market becoming reality. I think there's going to be massive opportunities for companies to create exponential value depending on the size of the market they can address, because now they can redeploy that human capital into roles that drive the value because they're allowed to be more of what they are.
That's exactly right. And so, people, again, oh no, we're not going to need software developers anymore. Well, I'll tell you what, we are not running out of hard problems to solve anytime
Yeah.
soon. We never have. The number of developers, software engineers, and the like, all of them have been growing, and they're growing at a pretty good clip, and they're going to continue to grow at a pretty good clip. It's just that they're going to become more dependent on their human qualities, and they're going to be less dependent on some of this drudgery, and they're going to be able to. We're just going to build more. We're going to build
Yeah.
more and better systems, and I think that same transition is going to occur elsewhere in the business space. People that learn how to use these tools to do their jobs, they're going to be in high demand, very, very high demand, because anytime you can start to automate these processes and change them and create them and do more things, you yourself become much, much more powerful. And the amount of work and the amount of value that you can create on using these tools becomes huge. And the other way to look at it is, we're going to put all these people how to work. Well, the people that have the business acumen or the financial acumen or the whatever stack we're talking about, they're going to be able to really do well, just in the same exact way that what we're seeing with developers now. As the technology gets better and better, we're not just talking about automating software development and automating software systems. We're talking about automating how we do business entirely and what we do there. And it's going to be a brave new world, but I think it's going to be a very interesting
exciting world, right?
Exciting.
So something's popped up in my mind when I read the white paper and across conversations. You talk about solving problems. And I know you've heard me say before, and I've said it actually in other recordings, other shows, that I view the gold rush not so much with the big LLM companies, but with the individuals or small groups with specific domain knowledge solving specific problems, levering those LLMs, levering that technology. And there are a lot of changes go in there, but if you just have somebody who's been working at a law firm or an accounting firm, or they've been working at a manufacturing company and they have domain knowledge, but they're not necessarily thinking of, well, how could I do this? What problem could I address? Because we tend to think, well, what problems can we address? Well, I mean, Musk addresses getting back and forth, into space with SpaceX. By the way, he's also developing robots. Oh, and he's also got this advanced battery technology. Oh, and he's also talking about a Mars shot. I wonder if he's pulling all this together, to facilitate that. Do you have to solve that kind of problem? I think is a question. There's an anxiety but I've always been a W-2 person. I've always been able to rely on this. I've always this and that. And I've always been a knowledge worker, whatever, however you might look at it. And so I step back and I wonder if people sometimes are going to struggle with this idea of, wow, what problem can I solve? Who's interested in my solution? How do I monetize it ultimately, right? Because you just don't want to solve a problem and have no home for it. And you don't want to create an unnecessary problem. You're about solutions. So I wonder if we could address this idea of problems for people to solve, to build new career path in this evolving environment. And I want to end it with the statement of one of the reasons why I think that you're just probably one of the very few handfuls of people I'd want to ask this question of in my network, is because you've been in a place where you've solved massive problems. And I know you've solved smaller problems along the way, and you've seen that whole gamut. Whether it was getting PET scan technology accepted and out into the marketplace, whether it's making small decisions as a pilot or a mechanic, and all these things that you've done. So I'm hoping you could help address, maybe for people who have anxiety about, what am I going to do?
Yeah, well, in the past, middle managers or, people who are running companies, when they see a problem or they see something is not working right, often the solution is to kind of build a process, hire a person to do that, and plug that person in to do that. I've described entrepreneurialism as that many, many times. My job as an entrepreneur is to figure out what needs to be done, package that up, teach somebody how to do it, and put them in and make it go. Well, there's not much of a difference between doing that. If you can describe the problem adequately, you can describe it in such a way that with the modern tools, that you can automate it in some way. So it's a matter of kind of making that jump. It's the same thought process. We're solving a problem within business, and all big problems are just a bunch of small problems lined up.
Right.
And so it over time, and fortunately, I'm a fairly patient person, so I can work something, and then I can go to sleep that night and not be just driving myself crazy and wake up the next morning with a half a dozen solutions that I've somehow worked out in my head overnight, and then back at it we go. So it's just continuous improvement where we're finding things, we're fixing things, we're moving it forward. And every now and again I'll get a really cool idea, and now the difference in time between cool idea to here it is in front of me is so close. It happens so fast. And but that whole process that we go through as people that operate these kinds of things, the old process driven approach, the thought process is the same as what we have to do now. You just got to learn how to use the new tools. Take a little time, learn about them. They're not that hard. They'll talk to you in plain language. It's not like you got to learn a computer language, or you got to learn, some completely foreign language that you don't understand. You can talk these things in plain language. And once you get it figured out, it's amazing. And what I've found is they'll learn with you. So, 6 months ago, I started really working with Claude Code and developing things. And I'm a PhD computer science level guy. I know what good code looks like, and I know what bad code looks like, and I know how I like to do it, and I've seen how others do it, and across the board. So as I started getting into it, started with small problems and small projects, and started working my way into it. And I review all the code. I look at everything before it gets committed, and I can review code a lot faster than I can write code. I think that's the key. But I can also write specifications. I know, since I've had a lot of experience across a lot of different business processes, I know how to write a job description. And so it's the same. All of that stuff is the same. And so as I got into it, I would correct Claude and tell it, hey, I really don't like how you worked this section. This is how I think it should be done. Okay. Boom. Now all of a sudden it looks like something that I wrote, and it doesn't forget. It doesn't slowly slide back into whatever it does. So now when I read code, I'm reading my code. And when I send agents off to do things, they're creating my code. And that has been a phenomenal experience, actually.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you also hit on this idea in your white paper. I'm just proving to you that I read it thoroughly.
Okay.
Is that
a bit of a read? It's kind of a heavy lift. It's not an easy one.
Well, you know what's funny is when I read it, I can hear your voice in my head. I'm like, well, and this happened, and da 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 da, and all that. And what I really like, because I had this conversation, I can't tell you how many years ago. I might have been in college, about slide rules and engineering tools. And you make the reference that when the pyramids were built, they had strings, ropes that they attached, and you have your little, what is that called? The plumb. They
Plumb
had a plumb
bob.
line. Yeah,
Yeah.
they had all that kind of fun stuff. And to go along, and eventually, an engineer pretty much had to be a mathematician in a lot of respects, because they had to do all kinds of calculus, blah, blah, blah. And eventually somebody came up with a slide rule. Oh, man. And the next thing you know, every engineering student on every campus and every college in the world walks around with a pocket protector and a slide rule. And then the scientific calculators come up.
Yeah.
And
And
what
that
did
would be
everyone...
the end of all engineers, because we were going to lose our cognitive minds because we're relying on these little electronic things.
We're relying on these little electronics that are doing the same thing we did with the slide rule, just a whole lot faster.
Yep.
And a whole lot more
better.
accurately, because it takes out some of the human involvement, and something that could be automated, if we can put it that way loosely. And what happened? Engineering innovation accelerated. What happened, when we got into these evolutions that allowed us to have more efficient tools. Now, I don't know how many people today can go out, get lost in the wilderness, and start a fire, or forage food, or whatever it might be. I can, but I grew up in the boonies.
Yeah.
And you almost live in the boonies now. So
I live in the boonies, yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of sit back. There's something to be said about losing basic skills for when there's no energy, there's no power available. But by and large, for 99.99999% of the people in the United States, especially, we're not really worried about that. And
from a business perspective, what really needs to happen. I mean, if I was going out and hiring a mechanical engineer for something, and I said, well, we use Pro E here. What kind of CAD packages are you familiar with? What do you like to use? And if they came back and said, well, I prefer to work with pencil and paper on a drafting table, I'm like,
you're not gonna hire them. No.
See ya. I need people who are much, much more productive and faster than that. Not that it's bad to draw with pencil on paper. I do it myself. I'll sketch things out and do that. But if you're not up to using the latest tools to get the most productivity out of what you're doing, then, man, learn CAD. And in this case, the same thing is true. When I first started writing code, I wrote my first C code on a PDP 1123, and the debuggers and things like that were pretty abysmal, right? And
Primitive.
And my boss at the time says, you don't need debuggers. The best debugger you got is in your head.
Great.
He's right. I mean, in a way, he's right. And I will often, when I'm trying to fix something like that, I'll often stop and, okay, let's think about it. What would Dr. Thompson have said? and then that all works. But as things have moved forward, I mean, it's just been, one development after another, after another, and after another, and you pick up the new tools. We got integrated development environments came on, and all that was just amazing. And we've continued on. The AI code tools are just another tool. They're a very powerful tool, and they're a sharp-edged knife. You can cut yourself if you're not careful and you're not paying attention. And people, I think, will probably get a little lazy with them, and they'll get bit a few times, and then they'll go back to checking everything and making sure it's right. But over time, like I said before, right now is the worst these tools are ever going to be ever again. They are going to get better and better, and they're already quite good. And I can produce some pretty powerful systems in a hurry that are going to be reliable. And they're not reliable because of the tools. They're reliable because of me and my humanity and my ability to double check and make sure that everything is right. But that is also part of my ethos as an engineer. I mean, that's what engineers are all about, right? We are supposed to do things that are going to be, in the public good and public safety. And we're not crazy people out there doing things. But it's like the Hippocratic Oath for doctors. Do no harm. And we're in a position now where that whole decision-making process for engineers is becoming much more upfront. It's no longer just about, are these little technical details that you are trying to deal with in order to make a database talk to a web page. That's it. Those are details. The humanity part is where you have to apply some ethics to what you're doing. Is that data safe? Is it encrypted and secure when it's traveling between the database and your web page? Is it subject to being hacked? Is it going to happen in a reliable fashion so that the user gets what they need? All of these things now come together, and the judgment part of it is the part that you need to have to make it reliable, to make it usable, to make it successful.
Yeah. No, people still do business with people.
Yeah, they do.
People still hire people.
Of course.
And I have yet to talk to an executive. I'm talking executive level talent candidates who has any inclination to do an AI interview as part of the process. They're like,
that will never happen in my company.
They're like, no,
that will not happen.
I want to talk to the person in charge or a peer. I want to, human to human. And I think that's something, to your point you just made. If we lose sight of the human part of it, we've lost. Because AI, I don't believe should be viewed as a replacement, but I think we should view it as going directly from gliders and propeller-driven aircraft to warp drive. It's that kind of a tool. And notice I skipped jet propulsion. I skipped rockets. I skipped this. Why? Because this is not something that allows you to take an incremental step. It allows you to take huge leaps in what you bring to market. And that is terrifying to a lot of people because they may lack the experience or the vision or the imagination. Speaking of which, I had a thought reading the white paper. Right now, and going forward, to your point, the tools are as bad as they're going to get. Okay. Going forward, people are going to be limited by two things: imagination and budget. And that is horribly frightening, terrifying, and incredibly exciting all at the same time, because imagination can be a great thing or a dangerous thing.
Yeah, and I see this whole concept, pushing into the structure of companies, and you think about it from this perspective. Venture capital and private equity, we think a lot about this whole buy versus build thing,
right?
And so, in private equity, they'll have a tendency to buy a company, maybe replace the leadership, try to renovate it a little and get it up and get it on a good growth track and grow it up for a few years and then turn around and sell it, make some money. That's great. It's been a great plan for them for a long time. However, that whole business model now comes into question because with a little bit of imagination and just a little bit of budget, maybe it's a better concept to just build a competitor. And so now you've got the venture capital guys coming in from the other end, which I resemble, and going, oh, what if I could do this? And then like in the next week, you've done it. So there's this reckoning that is going to occur. And I think I think you're probably going to find some crossover happening between those two communities. Private equities has tended to be pretty, I don't want to say slow because they don't move slow.
Mm-hmm.
Just more conservative in what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
They're really looking at cash flow and stuff like that. And the venture capital guys are looking at innovation and breaking things and kind of rebuilding the structure of whatever is out there.
Yeah.
And so I think there's going to be a bit of a reckoning in between, and we'll see how it plays out. I'm very interested actually to see how that plays out because it's a private equity
It
has
could be a doozy.
yeah,
It could be a doozy.
it
When are we
could be
going
a
to
big
see? When are we going to see the fusion of a primary VC with a primo PE? I would tell you in some respects we are. If you look at some of the big ones like Andreessen, who started in the
Andreessen,
VC
yeah.
space, they're doing that stuff already. But I think it's going to accelerate because remember the limiting factor in the VC world and in the PE world, if you put money aside, budget aside, is deal flow. And how do we focus in on deals that are only going to meet our thesis? And because, a VC, what you might look at a couple thousand deals, potentials or ideas or whatever a year or so.
We don't hit that many. At Open Technology Ventures, they're a very curated, right?
Yeah.
We operate in the AI space. And to your previous point about, the gold rush, in the gold rush, the miners didn't make a whole lot of money, but the guys that sold them shovels sure did.
They made bunches.
and food and tents and lumber and
Mhm.
Levi's jeans and all of those things, right? And so, for example, one of our big standouts is Anaconda. We
Mhm.
were a very, very early investor in Anaconda, and Canary Speech is another good one. We're kind of building tools that are going to
Mhm.
enable other large industries.
Right.
That's a really, really powerful approach to look at it. If you can see far enough ahead,
If you can
you
see
have
far
to
enough
you
ahead.
have to understand kind of what the needs are going to be.
Mhm.
Guys like me, my first machine learning patent was granted in 2010. So this is not a new game for me.
Mhm.
I have seen a lot of this, so I know what needs to happen there, and I am not alone.
No, you're not. And in fact, Mark, that points to, not to switch off this particular target at the moment, but that points back to something earlier in the conversation. We start talking about judgment-centric jobs. Judgment is not something people are born into this world with having, not of that caliber. Now
Unfortunately, I wish they were.
yeah, you can judge, oh, this tastes terrible and this tastes good, right? But when you're born, but as you advance forward, we all come into this world with a certain set of hardware. It is what it is. The software, the operating system we load on it those first few years matter because that gives us our paradigm through which we interpret the world. That's how we can absorb the untold gazillions of terabytes of information that come in through our senses and whatnot. But would you trust most teenagers to run a company? Heck, I got 6 kids. I've had 3 that went through. I've got one that's going to turn 16 in December, one that's turned 16 the following fall. You think I still don't get anxiety of those rascals driving down the road without me? Why? Do I doubt their physical capabilities? Do I doubt their intelligence? No, I doubt their judgment at a time of pressure and consequence. And I want them to be safe. And just as important, I want them to keep other people safe. And if we kind of just take that basic life lesson, one of the big concerns I have about the rise of technology and the hyperbole that's in the market, I don't see this coming from smart, reasonable players like Open Technologies. I don't see this coming from the big players like the Andreessens of the world. You see it coming from other folks. Is this hype that, oh, all you're going to do is sit on a couch and eat bonbons and collect your universal basic income. That's bad judgment, in my opinion, because if you try to take the humanity out of human, you're fighting a losing battle.
Yeah,
You know,
no doubt.
and when you fight a battle, it's a losing battle against nature. And I don't care if you look at it, if it's nature, this is how we've evolved for bazillions of years, or if you take it from the perspective of, hey, this is how we're designed. Either way, you're still fighting this mass and momentum that you're not going to overcome by changing human nature. So we need people who have this opportunity in their careers to grow, to develop the business acumen and experience, to have the good judgment, who understand and operate within certain legal, ethical, moral boundaries, so on and so forth. My concern is that we see the roiling, the unraveling of the entry level job market.
That is one of the things that does keep me up at night. It really
That's
does.
that's the future right there, that we're taking the foundation, the launching pad out from underneath them.
As a former professor, I've spent a lot of time uh, working with my students and working with my employees in the same way to grow them and to help them. I really like trying to help people be the person that they need to be
Mhm.
and the best person that they need to be. And, that is a very challenging task, and I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't think higher education is developing those kinds of skills in the right way. There are some entrepreneurial programs and things like that
Mhm.
where they're trying to give them a little bit of taste of that, but that's a semester project is a is not the replacement for 20 years
No.
at a
No, and you're
company.
not gonna get the educational institutions in this country, in the world, to pivot that fast because
No,
they're
no,
entrenched interests.
yeah,
And
they
some of
don't.
the things that were a good idea decades ago, well, let's tenure professors so that they are unafraid of speaking or doing the research or whatever. That's actually a hindrance because that's a big core group that has to change.
Yeah, talking about change
Oh,
management at the university level is
it's gonna be a bear. And that's
it's
one
tough.
of the reasons why I think we're gonna have for a time, kind of a split between the things that are too large and too unagile to evolve quickly and all the rest of us. And that's why I think part of the reason I think there's gonna be this huge explosion of entrepreneurialism because you know what? Most people thinking logically, I don't need to make $1 billion, but man, if I could solve a problem that nets me 3, 4, 5 million, I'm in
Right?
great shape. You know what? I might retire or I might just go solve another one or another 10.
Yeah, once you've hit that and you've solved one,
Mhm.
and I'll tell you the personal side of that is, oh wow, that was great, that was great, and then you start second guessing yourself. Say,
And now what?
was I really that good, or was I just lucky? So then you got to do it again, and then you do it again. Say, okay, now I'm practicing. I've got some shots on goal. Now I really know, I think, how to do this. So the next one's going to be even better. And away you go. And you can't stop. You can't. It's not something you can just walk away from. There's just
Well,
too many
you're
opportunities.
meant to be working towards goals and a purpose. You're meant to be in motion. We're built for motion. As people get older, they tend to sit on the couch more or in a recliner or whatever. But if you want to live a more full life, you've got to have motion. You got to move around. And I think that principle applies to what we're talking about right now.
Use
But
it or lose it, man.
but to get there, that foundation has to be built. And that foundation right now, I think, is in trouble, or at least in turmoil. And unfortunately, I think it's impacting more than one class year. I think it's impacting potentially that entire generation.
I think so.
And
I,
that's
I agree with you entirely. The problems associated with making that jump,
Mhm.
getting the judgment so that you can really contribute in a large scale is hard. And I think the current generation, after having gone through the pandemic and all of that, there's a lot of fear. Oh, there's not going to be any, climate change. There's not going to be anything left anyway. So why bother? Um, I think that's terrible. I
Mm.
think it's just a horrible
If
thing.
you take that view, that's an excuse for the laziness.
Yeah,
I mean, and
it is.
it's an
But I
excuse.
think there are a lot of overall mental health things going on there, due to kind of circumstance and how this all happened. And we can talk more about that in our next call when we start talking about my company.
I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag on that. But I think that'd be a great topic because I believe personally, and I felt this way for quite a while. I believe that mental health in general needs to be addressed in a more efficacious way, in a way that provides better results. And I am sick, sick, sick of over medication in this country. Medication should almost never be a permanent, ongoing, I have to have it to live sort of thing. You use it to get you to a certain point, perhaps, of whatever kind. I mean, I don't take ibuprofen every day. I probably wouldn't have a liver if I did. But there are times you get a soft tissue injury or you're real sore from training or whatever. I might take 5 or 6. After I had my knee scoped and wasn't taking real pain pills, I would take, and the orthopedic said, your size, just take 6 all at once. And, take the edge off. But a week or 2 later, I'm not taking that stuff anymore. I'm not going to touch it a day or 3 later, whenever I feel better. And I think you have some great stuff cooking, and I don't want to put it out on the front burner of the stove right now. What I do want to ask though is when you review that white paper, and of course we're going to post a link to it when we drop this podcast episode.
I appreciate that. I think more people should read it.
No, I absolutely agree.
It would help. I think what I really want to come out of all of that is I want people to understand more about the situation as a whole and what's going to happen. Because if you understand some of that, you can make the necessary changes so that you can benefit from it. And if I can help with a little bit of understanding, the same process that I had to go through, I had to kind of do it the hard way. But I always prefer to learn from other people's mistakes than my own. That's
Right.
just kind of how I am. So that's going to leave a mark.
Vicarious is such a good word.
Yeah, vicarious is great. So live vicariously through me. Read the paper, and it'll give you a whole bunch of insight into some of the changes that are happening and some of the changes that are coming.
And if someone wants to dive deeper, I'm assuming you'd be open to them reaching out via LinkedIn.
Sure, LinkedIn. Sure,
know,
anytime.
Yeah. And before we wrap this up, Mark, I want to just say as we move forward in the C-suite edge, open technologies, we're kind of breaking new ground. We're going to have more of a roundtable format. We are lining up a very strong, like varsity level list of
Yeah.
people to join us. I mean, just really strong. I mean, you and I are driving the bus, but we're going to be joined by one of your partners, who is, I mean, it's funny because I mentioned his name to someone in the tech space that I know just yesterday. He was like, he's coming on. I'm like, yeah, he's going to be a regular. And this guy was like, okay, yeah, I'll be listening. I was like,
darn right. Darn right.
And sometimes, and I know we don't hear your partner's name out in the news every day, or your name or my name. We're not, Elon, we're not Dario, we're not
like
these.
that. I don't want to operate like that.
Oh, heavens,
I got
no.
work to do. I got real work to do.
But what I like about this show and where we're taking it is that if you want to stay on the front edge of what's happening with AI, technology in general, but specifically AI, there are going to be some of the mainline heavyweights who are getting things done and are very practicable. We're not going to be promoting hype and just getting to the nitty gritty. And you know what? If we're wrong about something, I'll make sure Mark is the first to admit it.
Yes. Okay. I'll take the hit.
I
I'll
don't
take the
mind
hit. I've
taking
been
the
wrong
hits.
so many times. It's not even funny.
Well, I'm the non-tech guy, right? I'm the people person allegedly. And I say allegedly, there's rumors, but I really hope that people who hear this, what you and I are recording as we kick off the season with the C-Suite Edge Open Technologies, I really hope people read the white paper and then realize that as you join us on this journey over the next coming months, coming years on a show, you're going to get exposed to really everything you're going to need, not just to survive what's going on in this marketplace, but to thrive, to reinvent yourself, to be more human, because ultimately that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Looking forward to
Mark,
it.
thanks so much, very much for joining me.
My pleasure. And looking forward to doing it again. We'll talk to you later.